Hi everyone. I'm Kristen Walker, MTSS facilitator with Everett Schools, and I'm here today with Dr. Kaylee Mitchell from Evergreen Middle School, and we are going to talk with you today about stress in children. And I'm really excited about this series. I think it's a really important topic right now while we're going through this pandemic, but I think it's also going to be super valuable after we're kind of back to normal. We still want to think about this. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Mitchell.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And the more information we can disseminate to parents, the better right now.
Yeah. So in this first video, we're going to talk about just understanding stress in general. And then this is going to be a video series. So we're going to follow up with a couple more videos on some strategies that you can use at home when your child is experiencing some more significant stress. So let's talk about that. Tell us about stress.
Well, we're finding that there are a significant and increasingly number of people who are stressed, and we're experiencing at more intense levels really than ever before. And so a lot of times I get that question of like, okay, why is my child responding this way to stress? Like my other kids didn't do it, I don't do it. And, my kid is so stressed out, and they're really seeking advice and like, why is this happening? And especially right now with, stress really just dominating our world and our society. It's really important to start understanding how it operates. And I really love the stress model. The stress model comes from Marsha Linehan, and she's out of the University of Washington, and she's done a lot of work in dialectical behavioral therapy, but she really breaks it down. You can see on screen the stress model. She really breaks it down into why we experience stress differently. So kind of it as the starting point, we have to remember that everyone has a different baseline of stress and or fixed level of stress to start with. So really the emotional baseline of your child can kind of be described of like what their emotional experience is day to day. And so since each child starts at a different level of stress, this is based on three main things. And you can see history is one. And so history can be things like even systemic oppression or discrimination, racial injustices, abuse, experiences related to poverty or conflict. So history really starts impacting our baseline. The second one is biology. Biology is a number of things. It's our health, it's our genetic makeup, it's our hormones we see among teenagers and that chemical imbalance. And then we also have current experiences. And that is what is going on in our environment around us in our current state. And so all of these different things impact our baseline. So, but one of the things, Kristen, that I always tell parents is that it's really important to remember that everybody's baseline is different and we can't compare them. I think oftentimes we want to compare our children to each other or to other children and peers, and that's just not practical because so we need to get away from that comparison model to peers and same age. Just because a kid's the same age doesn't mean they're going to have the same experiences, historical, biological, or even current experiences and how that shapes your child. So here's the kicker with the stress model. You can see here on this chart that, again, the person in green is different than the person in the gray or purple. They start at a different baseline. What we know is that when there is a triggering of an event, or whether that's a traumatic event or something just stress related, it could be as simple as receiving feedback from a teacher or a conflict that arises between a sibling. It can be so small and a trigger or stressful event happens. And what we know is somebody that starts with a higher baseline initially, they tend to respond more quickly to that stress. They stay there for longer. And on top of that, they take a longer time to come down from that level of stress. So that means somebody starting a higher baseline is going to experience stress differently. And you can see that definitely represented in the gray area. So, Kristen, I have a question for you. You have kids?
I do. Yes, I have a few.
A few kids. Okay. Have your kids ever experienced tantrums, or have you ever seen them have outbursts before?
Yes, for sure. And this is very relevant because they all experience them a little bit differently. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. So what happens is you're, as a parent, you're seeing these kind of behaviors, and you know, in development is different too. So in teens, we might see responses to stress with coping things, starting to use maybe drugs or self-harming, suicide ideation. Those are going to be more intense coping responses. We see kids have outbursts or tantrums at younger levels, you know, kicking, hitting, throwing things, those kind of things. So we have all these different levels of like tantrums and outbursts and responses to stress. But what happens is when your child experiences these strong emotions and they're very painful, they want to escape them. Literally, they no longer want to feel that way. They no longer want to feel these intense emotions, and they want to escape them. And that's why those behaviors and those coping skills that we consider unhealthy are happening. But the reality is they don't want to feel the emotion anymore. And so the brain does what it does, and it responds to it, and it reacts in a way so that everything feels less bad. And so that's why we want to, you know, we really want to watch like our reactions and our child's reactions, because you can see that there's a range here from 0 to 100 in the stress model. Well, when we have a stressful event to happen, and let's say you already have a high baseline, and you respond really quickly, and it lasts longer, the intensity of emotion, it takes longer to come down. Well, you're going to experience this fire so much quicker and longer than a person who has a lower stress level. And so what we have to do is we have to create and help our child have coping skills that are at those varying levels of stress. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but a skill that's going to work at the lower stress level is going to be a different skill than when we're on fire and our brain can't think, and we have thoughts that are just ruminating in our minds and going a million miles per hour. So we want to help children. What my goal is, what educators' goal is, and counselors' goals is really just to help children find good and healthy coping ways, so they aren't getting involved with drug use or addiction or having the outbursts that are really challenging to handle. So that's a little bit about the stress model, to think in terms of the tools that we can give our youth to help dealing with their varying level of stress.
That is so helpful. That's such an interesting but such a clear way to visualize and think about our different, even for me having 3 children, and think about the differences between them and how they respond to stress. So thank you for explaining that, and thank you for the clear visual to go along with that. So we're going to come back with a couple of other videos that give some strategies that we might use to respond to this, and think about, I guess, would you say, like how they fit for our students that do experience that, or our children that experience that fire there, what we might do to help them?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a skill called opposite action that's going to be for kids when they are experiencing kind of a stressful event, but they still have the mindset to be able to cognitively think through something. And we're going to be talking about another skill. It's called cold water, that we can use when we are literally on fire, and it's stop, drop, and roll style.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you for this.